And a pleasant good morning to you all, wherever you may be, and welcome on Facebook Live. I'm Bess Navarra, brand ambassador for Music Direct and musicdirect.com. This is Friday's edition of Conversations from the Listening Room. It is indeed a pleasure to have you with us on this beautiful day here in Chicago, wherever you may be. We hope you're doing well wherever you are, and that you've been enjoying these series of conversations from the listening room. But of course, conversations brings us a little bit closer. It gives us a little bit more face-to-face between you and us. And we also get to talk to a lot of people, many who are on the cutting edge of knowledge in our industry of audio and high-end performance, and of course the audiophile world as we know it. But we also talk to some of the fresh stars of the moment who are also making their faces known through their back stories and their places in our industry. And one organization that has been great for Music Direct is NAD. Hard to believe that in the decades since then, the company that used the term New Audio Dimensions would reach out to consumers in a way that has transcended the idea that affordable audio is something that is not a problem for audiophiles who are on a budget, or just people who want to hear music with clearer quality, with better equipment. Everything from a high performance CD player to the latest state-of-the-art streaming devices and amplifiers. That's what NAD has morphed into in the decades that they've been around. And to make sense of how the company and the people behind the scenes are doing, I've got not one, but two people behind the scenes to talk to us. On my far right, if I'm looking at it from that perspective, is Marshall Currier. He does a lot of product training for dealers throughout the United States and in some parts of the world. And one of the big brain trusts over at Lenbrook Group and NAD is Greg Stidsen. He's Chief Technology Officer, and they join us from their respective homes in their respective cities. Greg, let me start with you over there in suburban Massachusetts near Boston. How are you, and how's life treating you?
In some ways, I've enjoyed the shutdown because it brings me back to my youth when it was a much quieter world and you could hear the birds singing. And my yard has never looked better in suburban Boston, and so I'm okay.
Marshall, of course, you're out there near wine country. I hate you. I hate you with a passion as that. But I'm curious as to how things have been. Last time we talked about this was during the Expona Super Day Fest, and I'm sure time has passed. Has there been any changes? How is your family? How is your state of mind throughout this whole situation?
Yeah, thank you, Bess. I've got family all over the U.S., and fortunately, everyone is alive and well and safe, and hopefully they will remain that way. My wife and I have enjoyed the last couple of months getting to know each other, both working from home in our little place out here in California. But yeah, like a lot of us, just spending some really quality time at home, getting back to the basics, I think is the best way to describe it. Even though every day that ends in Y is kind of the same, and the weekend doesn't really seem like anything much different, it's nice that we're kind of slowly but surely getting a little bit back to normal. So.
Have you both been able to, as a result of this time, even though I know NAD has been very, very busy of late, but on a personal level, have you been able to do something out of the ordinary? Let me start with you, Greg. Have you, you've mentioned your garden's great, but have you also found time to just sit back and go, hey, I remember that tune?
Well, for me, Bess, music is such an integral part of my life that where most people sit down and watch TV, I sit down and listen to music. So I wouldn't say my music listening habits have changed that much, but there is definitely a lower noise level in the background, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, what airplanes? There's nowhere to be found. I'm even in a glide path here in Chicago where I'm looking. So it could be a dynamic feeling. Marshall, what about you? How have you been able to sort of stretch your horizons creatively and mentally as a result of it?
Well, creatively, it's been fun to do these types of things and watch other people do these types of things. I think creatively, it's been fun to try and do our best to connect with other people, talk about music and talk about electronics and our various enjoyment of it. But what's interesting about my wife and I is that we're just using our hi-fi more often. We're watching less TV. Sometimes we have kind of that the secondary screen effect, where we may be reading a book on an iPad or a Kindle and listening to the music in the background. Other times we're just quietly enjoying an album together. The nice thing about being at home and being in a small space is I almost want to say my system never gets turned off. I mean, we're just constantly enjoying music and movies and things like that.
Greg, I'm going to start this question with you. Tell me a little bit about the history of NAD, where you can, and why it continues to be basically the unmatched product line in the audiophile world, given the strength of its original, 3020 as the DNA for all of us to aspire to want audio equipment in general.
Company was born in the 70s by a group of distributors in Europe who said, nobody's making electronics that we want to sell. Like, it was the age where the big Japanese companies got involved and kind of commoditized the category. And, great American brands like Marantz were being bought up by the Far Eastern concerns. And, hi-fi was really changing. And so it was a group of distributors that said, why don't we make our own brand that represents our values of musicality and affordability, and that's kind of how the whole thing started, and it evolved from there. Our managing director was Marty Borish, who ran the thing out of his walk-up apartment in London and out of a shoebox, basically, and it's attracted an amazing group of talented people over the year that all sort of share that same ethos of really good sound, but not over the top. Like, we don't try to be the best in the world on an ultimate basis. We want to be the best for everybody. We want to be really, really good for the affordable amount. We can take high-end principles and apply them to moderate price parts and make a really nice product out of it.
And Marshall, maybe you could potentially build around this, but NAD has built its reputation around the world as one of the best value brands, as Greg and I have alluded. But now with the Master Series, how has the Master Series and NAD been positioning itself as more than a value brand? I mean, they've had to mature. They've had to do other things that we've go through. We've seen a lot of great gear over the years, but I think in the case of the challenge to put the Master Series to market must have been something very intense for you guys to do over time.
What's interesting about the Master Series for us now, and I'd like to hear what Greg has to say about it, going back over the decades, but Master Series today is really a platform where we can come out with some class-leading performance solutions and then let that trickle down into the other Classic Series and D Series products. Things like balanced audio inputs, built-in BlueOS, multi-room streaming. The original BlueSound product was actually a Master Series NAD product. That was the first ever product that ran what is known today as BlueSound. And that was part of the digital Master Series suite. That was the original M50. It was a CD Ripper music server product with an external hard drive. That was in the Master Series. So Master Series over the last couple of years since I've been with the company has been kind of a breeding ground for these new technologies, and it's really allowed us to deliver some very, very cool solutions to the market. And I think you'll see that with the new M33.
Definitely. Greg, what are your thoughts on that, as you are obviously one of the people who put a lot of brain trust into developing or being part of the team to put these products together?
Well, what we saw was the entire industry going up market. So, when I started my hi-fi career, the hot high-end preamplifier was the Audio Research SP3 at the outrageous price of, I think it was $695. Very aspirational product. And now we've got preamplifiers that are tens of thousands of dollars. So I don't think Master Series veers far off the value chart for us. It's a value in the same way that if you compare it to a $20,000 amplifier, our $5,000 one still represents that kind of a value proposition. But certainly the whole, we've done much more with technological innovation, and Master Series has allowed us, if you will, a larger budget to spend on something that, it takes time to make something that's new into something that's more affordable. So we can start with Master Series. We're not counting the pennies when we make that product. We're making it as a high-end product, but we don't attach a ridiculous price tag to it just to make it better. It uses the same formula we use for all of our products, which is, what it costs to build it, what it costs to develop it, and a little bit of margin for you guys to sell it and support your customers. So that's kind of the formula, and we don't inflate anything just to make it quote unquote better.
That brings us to the subject of one of the biggest innovations that NAD has produced in its long history, and that is the innovation of the BlueSound product line, and in particular its mating into what is referred to as BlueOS. Marshall, you've really been phenomenal during dealer sales training meetings when we get to know more about BlueOS. We initially had it as a face-to-face, conversation,
right.
But now we're, in this time and age, we're enjoying video conferencing, which is a great portal for all of us, and for all of the entire Lenbrook Group dealer network, including us at Music Direct. But I think one of the things that I have to say that I loved about it on first receiving it was the form factor of the very first power node, which I think you guys gave it kind of a nickname, was for me the moment when I realized, well, you're in it now. Get into streaming and be really be open and receptive to it. Of course, it also caused a paradigm shift on how I have my house's network set up. And a bit of a learning tool on that. How does BlueOS give music lovers a real audiophile performance? What are than some of the other streaming platforms and products that are currently out there? And how has the BlueSound experience opened NAD users and prospective buyers of the product line to this new environment? How has it helped you guys?
Well, what's interesting about BlueOS and BlueSound is that we just got done talking about Master Series, right? And one of the more unusual products that is running the BlueSound operating system, or BlueOS, is inside the M10. And the M10 is unlike almost any other Master Series product. And it's part of a theme we're doing this summer called Just Add Speakers. I find that as I talk to dealers coast to coast, it's fun for clients and for customers to kind of mix and match components and get in and choose this DAC and this preamp and this power amp and things like that. But these complete solution products like the M33, the M10, the Power Node are really wonderful solutions. The Power Node, as you mentioned, getting into the BlueSound line, the Power Node is basically an integrated amplifier in different clothing. Even though it looks like a streaming box, the Power Node has 3 inputs now. The new version of the Power Node, which was launched at the end of 2019, includes HDMI with audio return channel. And that we added HDMI with audio return channel when it already had 2 inputs. The Power Node 2i had 2 inputs already. So now it has 3 inputs. It features IR control. So even though it looks like kind of one of these streamer magic boxes that appeals to younger people, it is a fully grown adult integrated amplifier that just is missing a volume knob on the front. And you can overcome that obviously with a smartphone controller. You can also overcome that by taking any third-party remote control, and you can dig up your old VCR remote, or if you've got a tape deck or something and you want to dedicate a remote control to that Power Node for volume control and play, stop, pause, and things like that, as well as presets. But sorry for the long answer, but the point there is that BlueSound, even though it started off with BlueOS in this streaming solution, has migrated up into the M33, up into the M10, and up into all these other solutions. And so now you have a single app. And when you open up the application, if you have an NAD product, at the top, in the top left corner, it says NAD. If you open up the application and you have a BlueSound product, it says BlueSound there at the top of the application. So BlueOS or BlueOS is a platform for us that's just going to get better and better over time.
That's great. Greg, let me talk to you a little bit more about the BlueSound history. This is coming at a time when there was a lot of primitive app capability, and frankly, just very little sensitivity to the thought of fusing computer audio into the listening universe. When your team began to develop BlueSound and morph it into the great platform that it is now, what must have been running through your mind in terms of the development stage, its incubation, its testing? Was there a lot of hurdles that you had to jump in trying to get to that place?
Yeah, I mean, our original thought back in 2001 was that we would do some network distribution of audio. That was becoming something on the horizon. And we actually showed a product in, I think it was 2004, called the NetCap, the Network Capture Box, which did both audio and video over the network. Or that was the plan. But, it was the devil in all of these network products is the network and the software. And while in those early days we thought as a hardware company we could partner with someone who had the software, it really turned out that nobody had the software. The closest thing out there was Squeezebox. And just as we were about to do something with those guys, they closed down basically. In 2008, they basically shut down the whole operation. We did benefit from picking up a lot of those original Squeezebox engineering talent, and that's a lot of what's inside the foundation of BlueOS. Goes back to that. At that time, it was the only one that would do high resolution. It was the only one that would do gapless playback. We've enhanced it a lot with the multi-room capability over the years, and just kept adding codecs. Do all the lossy ones. We do, FLAC. We do MQA. We have a new one called AuraStream, which is a high-res codec that's we use for streaming Neil Young archives, and I think you'll see some other streaming services adopt that method of streaming. So it's always been high res from the beginning, and we've always looked closely at what audiophiles wanted. We wanted this to be a music-based software package, not a media, not like UPnP, which has 15 profiles and only 2 or 3 of them are audio-based. So right. It's a real audio system built by audiophiles, music lovers, and that's what we've got.
Working off of your iPad or your tablet or your phone devices, and you downloaded the BlueSound, the preparation process, going back to the just add speakers, here, really does well for anybody who might feel a little scared or intimidated because their home setup isn't quite ready for it. But with the right tools, I think it really plays well to this. And let me extend that question a little bit further for you, Marshall, because you're the one who has to sit there to talk to everyone from CI to that one guy who runs that really small shop in the small towns of the United States and around the world.
Right.
The idea behind the NAD that we know now was just as important then, and it's just plug and play, get on with it, get to know music. What is it that we have to do so that when somebody gets his or her piece for the first time, they should, what are the fundamentals, the easy things for them to do?
Well, the fundamentals of any good product are a good experience on the software side and great sound quality. And the exciting thing about BlueSound and BlueOS in the last year and a half, 2 years, is that we do our own application. If you have your own digital music, which is the BlueOS controller, we offer AirPlay control. We offer Spotify Connect. We offer Roon, and then we also offer Bluetooth. And we even do Bluetooth in from your phone and then out to headphones as well. So no matter where you're coming from, you don't really necessarily have a new application to learn if you don't choose to have to learn a new application. So if you want to use AirPlay, use AirPlay. If you want to use Spotify Connect, use Spotify Connect. If you want a high resolution experience or a different experience, maybe with your own content, then you do use the BlueSound app. But what's interesting about the BlueSound app or the BlueOS controller is that it's like any other music player out there. If you've got one menu system there on the left-hand side, you got your source content, and then you just hit play, and it'll play the whole album. And if you want to get into the weeds and kind of disable some of the automatic playback functions, you can do that. If you want to build your own playlists, you can do that. If you want to import playlists from iTunes, maybe you got deep into the Apple ecosystem, back in the day, and you're making iTunes playlists, you can import that. Some of these things are obvious. A lot of these things are obvious. Some of these import-export things are less obvious, but what's neat about this, and Greg knows this all too well, you cannot have a platform like this without a support backend, the support backend, talking about the network, talking about apps. And so if you visit support.bluesound.com, just put the word support in there, support.bluesound.com. If you want to import a playlist, or if you want to drag and drop your music onto the vault, you can do that, and it's not rocket surgery in order to figure that out. So,
well, that's cool. And going back to the creation of these components, Greg, Marshall makes mention of its utility to work just about everything that you throw at it. So Bluetooth and whatnot. That begs the question where some manufacturers in previous designs, or even in some competitive places, always say, I don't want to put the Bluetooth device in my component because it'll add noise, or it'll do something to the power supply, or upset the chain of operations. That isn't the case with these pieces, is it?
No, and I think Bluetooth is kind of misunderstood as well. We've worked very closely with the engineers that develop Bluetooth, and they think Wi-Fi is just so dumb. It's like, all they do is crank up the power, and Bluetooth operates in these low power environments and does channel hopping, and it's kind of amazing what it does. Even though if you're, we're really all about high res audio, so Bluetooth, even with aptX, is still a lossy codec. It's only compressed 4:1 in the case of aptX, but it is still a lossy codec. On the other hand, it's really convenient. Every device has it.
mm-hmm.
It gives you instant access to so much music. And we're not really in a position to dictate, put our nose up in the air and say, oh, Bluetooth is no good. You can't use that. It's wherever your music is, and in many cases, there's a family, there's kids, there's, we want to be open to all the sources for music and all the different ways that it can be enjoyed. And I think if you listen even to Bluetooth on a BlueSound or an NAD product, it sounds pretty darn good. It's not like the old days where it was just sounded like an old telephone. It's pretty musical these days.
You mean I can't make it sound like an AM radio? Oh,
There's probably a way to do that, but
I'm sure
we're not interested.
I've always thought that was the case. Let's try something different now. We've been talking about streaming. We've been talking about the creation of the Blue OS module and how life has become more integrated and more intensified. But to the traditionalist, there are two categories that still continue to do extremely well for us here at Music Direct. And that is, of course, analog, and, of course, the folks that still have in their possession physical media, most notably the compact disc. NAD has the envious position of continuing its trend of making physical disc products, as well as maintaining their love for the vinyl turntable as far back as the 1980s, 1990s, even beforehand. I'm wondering, Greg, if that has created a balance, an impact. How is that category being felt for you guys as you go through your development stage of equipment?
Well, we've got as you mentioned, we have products in those categories, and we keep bringing out new products in those categories. I think we have a lot of expertise in that area, and we know a lot of our customers really enjoy listening to LPs and CDs as well. People, as you mentioned, people have large collections. So, our CD player sales, for example, have grown over the recent years as others drop out of the market. In some ways, we're kind of the last person standing. But, again, we have a very agnostic approach. It's like, wherever you worship music, you're welcome in our church. So that's kind of the way we look at it.
Has the evolution of records, which of course is basically a lot of Music Direct's bread and butter here at the moment. Has that caused an uptick in general in the production of your turntables, for example?
Well, we've introduced new turntables using, new technology. As you mentioned, the turntable itself, being a mechanical device, it's all about precision of manufacture and precision of parts. If you have any unwanted resonances or movements in the mechanism, you're going to hear that in the music. So it's all about getting the ultimate precision in parts and the way they work. And there's just been a lot of work done on that over the last 20 years. I think we wouldn't have the quality of LP playback we have if it wasn't for digital, because back in the bad old days, LPs were pretty terrible sounding for the most part, and they've become spectacularly good sounding in the last couple of decades as the LP people tried to match up with what digital had, which was very low noise, very low speed variation, or no speed variation. Some of those things that were always problems for LPs have now been really resolved in a much better way than it ever had been before.
It's good that you say that, because it's sort of a twofold response for me. Number one, what do you mean? Dynagroove is bad? Come on. But I also have to say that for our customers at Music Direct and musicdirect.com, the growth of vinyl is tethered in part because of turntables like yours, and also the sort of maturation of the audience in general. But by maturation, I refer to the fact that there's a younger generation that has been embracing it. I can recall stories where I constantly get a phone call from a customer who says, hey, my nephew, my daughter, my niece, my nephew, my son, they just took my entire record collection, and that was the greatest mistake I've ever done. On the flip side, their children have become so enamored by what the vinyl sound is to them as opposed to the old school CD. And Marshall, the question for you is with regard to the digital technologies, because you're that, not to sound like I'm placing the age game, but
no, it's okay.
Yeah, whatever. The compact disc market still holds its own, especially for those who would like to go to, say, a used record market or other place to collect that one disc that still isn't available on vinyl. What do you say to those guys that are buying CD players and really still embracing the technology of the moment?
Well, we have two CD players, and I think Greg said this in some prior conversations, that if you have the partnerships in the manufacturing, making CD players is still a great business because there are so few companies doing it. And so we have two current products in our line, the 568 and the 538, and they sound fantastic. And true to NAD, you get terrific sound quality for the money. We're not spending a lot of money on frills, bells and whistles and things, and you get a full function remote control, full function digital outputs, analog outputs. So in terms of the CD player, we're there if the client needs one. And I think what's interesting is that for every opportunity we have to reach out to people who are in the market for that product, who want an NAD product, we can serve that as well. But every conversation I have with a client on the phone, because I do talk to clients from time to time, every conversation that I have with a client on the phone always ends with, tell me about this vault thing. Tell me about this vault. So even though we're still doing well with CD players, we had 3 models, we have 2 currently, but it's always kind of ebbing and flowing. There's always a lot of curiosity for how do I get the cover art and all that stuff closer to me, rather than having the CD player 10 feet away in my equipment rack. How do I get that closer to me and have that scrolling experience that I want? So, but yeah, we're doing great with CD players, and it's a wonderful market to be in.
There was, of course, the announcement of the new M33 BlueSound streaming amplifier. This represents a much more, how shall I put it, 777, 747, Airbus 380, that kind of feel. when it comes.
It's a major project.
It is a major project. Greg, let me start with you. Tell me about the genesis of the M33. What was under the hood in getting this thing to market?
Well, this will replace the M32 in our lineup. It's integrated amplifier and master series. We just do one integrated in that category. And the M32 won the ESA award. It's been a very successful product. So for us to come out just a couple of years later with a new version called the M33 represents some major improvements that we have been developing, and we wanted to showcase it in this product. So aside from all of the functionality with BlueOS and all of the inputs, unlike a power node that has three inputs, this one has almost unlimited inputs. Using modular design construction, there'll be some additional inputs that can be added down the road if you have such a need for those. But I would say one of the most intriguing features of this is a new amplification technology we're using called Eigentakt, which is a German word that means self-oscillating. It's the next generation of Class D technology. And we've been working with a Danish company called Purify, which has two of what we think is the world's most preeminent audio engineers at this time. Lars Risbo, who did the original Takt Millennium for Lingdorf, and then went on to TI to develop all of their digital products, and Bruno Putzis, who did the UCD with Philips, and then the Hypex Encore, which we've been using in some of our amplifiers. And now there's this new thing called Eigentakt. And all I can say is that we are just blown away by the performance of this amplifier. It is really spectacular, and it's something that I think all of your listeners will want to be able to take a listen to at some point. It just has so much transparency, so much naturalness, so dynamic. It's just, it's hard to think of superlatives for this thing. It's so right. It's just really a joy to listen to.
Well, let me ask you this to extend on the question. Amplification has always been one of those things where it either sounds really good or the guy or gal is just going to sit there and go, yeah. In trying to source out an amplifier that you feel is the best fit for it, do you take into account variables like what he or she is going to be using in terms of speaker loads?
Well, that's one of the nice things about the Eigentakt, is that it is completely stable with all speaker loads. And that's a problem with a lot of Class D designs, because they have an output filter that, like a tube amplifier or a valve amplifier, can interact with the speaker load. But this does not have that issue. It's what we call load invariant. It has exactly the same response and distortion with any 2 ohms, 4 ohms, 8 ohms, 16 ohms. Doesn't really matter what it's looking at. It is the same.
And in terms of its capabilities, if I'm correct, and Marshall, please correct me if I'm wrong, is it a touchscreen design on this one as well?
It is, yeah. A couple of big differences between the M33 and the M32. In addition to the amplification platform, integrated BlueOS, so no need for the BlueSound card or the BlueOS module. It's just built in. It's native. One of the big advantages is it has a built-in room correction system, a mixed phase room correction system from Dirac Live. So that unit comes with a microphone, does a multi-point calibration in your room, even though it's a stereo product. And it also will be upgradable with new versions of Dirac's bass control features coming out later in 2020, we hope. What's also cool is, even though it's a stereo product, it also features bass management, dual subwoofer outputs that are stereo subs, and as Greg said, lots of upgradability. It's got modular design construction, something that we use in lots of other products, like our home theater products and our older classic series products. So the M33, yeah, the touchscreen, I think best, I got to be honest with you, the best feature about the touchscreen isn't the fact that it's touchscreen. It's got VU meters on it. So, they're digital, but they just kind of stare at the VU meters. They just love the VU meters. So, yeah, it's a very, very cool product, the M33.
That's awesome. And gentlemen, this is expected. Greg or Marshall, I don't know if you can either answer this. When is it expected to really be available for us to get our hands on it and offer to all of our customers?
We're looking at next month, or for first of next month in large quantities. So. Some dealers already have their orders in place. Some customers are already in line for it. So
it's definitely one of the big names that'll be carrying the product. And you folks can certainly see it on our website at musicdirect.com or give our team a call on this. Let's go crystal ball here for a few minutes. And I want to ask Greg in particular, because you're always tinkering and you're always looking at what's going on in the world today. Through your lens, the audio industry has a lot of people wanting to see product, yes, that's affordable, but also that really is the gamut of sounding good. But are you looking even further ahead for what NAD wants to do, and how do you go through that process in terms of your own product development theory?
Well, we're certainly always looking at trends, and we try to keep at the cutting edge of what's going on. And I mean, that's really why we have modular design construction, is that sometimes our crystal ball gets a little cloudy and some things come along that we weren't quite expecting. And modular design construction allows us to go back to our customers and say, here's a new technology. You can add it to the one you've already got. You don't have to trash it, bin it, and start all over again. But in terms of where we see the music industry going, it's in a huge evolution right now. I think you're going to see a lot more live performance being streamed. We've worked with MQA on a couple of these live performances where they're transmitted in MQA high resolution. And so I think that's a trend that we're definitely looking closely at. The further integration with the automated home or the smart home, that's another area where we definitely are focusing a lot of our attention to make sure that we can be the sonic component of the future home.
What do you say to some of us, myself included, who are still a bit of a traditionalist and we want to be able to have products that have buttons and knobs? I mean, you're still putting out there great equipment to further the evolution of the brand in the 21st century, but there are also still those legacy or those classic products like the 165, the BEE technology of that moment. Is that something you continue to shine a light on in your product development time as well?
Well, buttons and knobs, I know there's a great tactile quality to them, and I don't think we'll ever get rid of the knob. Everybody loves a knob. But the buttons part is really a problem because they're mechanical, they have less than ideal electrical characteristics unless you're spending gazillions of dollars, and even then you've got issues. So for us, going to something like a touch screen basically means that we can take this box and make it something different in the future by a software upgrade. So we can add a feature, we can add a function, we can change the way it controls. We listen very closely to our customers and what they're asking for. And a lot of our product innovations are really customer innovations that we've simply put into a product.
Marshall, do you look at the responses from dealers like ourselves and also help in that construction, in that level of technology development?
Yeah, a great example of this is our M10. The M10 was one of the first products that had that beautiful new color, high resolution touchscreen. And we have this kind of, I don't want to call it a standby mode. It's more of a resting state of when you're listening to music, the M10 gives you a nice, beautiful image of the cover art. and then the name of the album you're listening to. And you can customize it and flip it upside down and move around, what appears on top and on bottom, but the cover art is kind of the static part. And about 2 months ago, we came out with an update where we, very similarly to our application, our smartphone application, we would kind of superimpose in the background with a nice bokeh effect the album artwork behind the real album artwork. And this was apparent on the front of the M10. And a lot of our customers came back and said, I preferred the black background, because the cover art used to just float on this nice black background on the front panel. And we changed that over to replacing the black background with the superimposed kind of faded cover art. And the customers came back nearly immediately and said, I like the black background. And so we came out with an update. I want to say it was 2.5, 3 weeks after the first update. And we said, hey, we're going to add a dark mode. And so we brought back that feature. So that's just a great example. I think Greg's dead on. You're never going to lose that nice big volume knob experience like on the M33, on our 778 home theater receiver. I think that's going to stick around for a very long time. It's very similar to the steering wheel, right? But everything else about the experience, it's so much easier to offer a bevy of solutions with the touchscreen.
That's cool. That's very cool. Let me ask you guys now, while we have a few more minutes, or a few minutes left, excuse me, to open up that little attic of your brain for a second. Because there's always a story that gets you from where it all began to where you are now in your industry and in your respective careers. Greg, can you name a time when in your life that you hit on something that allowed you to love music more than you know, or love the technology that you're embracing? Was it a career moment? Was it a life moment? What happened there for you?
Two things happened for me. One was I had a college roommate who couldn't decide if he wanted to be a visual artist or a musical artist. And he opened my eyes to music in a way that, I had sort of liked, I liked the Stones and the Beatles and the pop groups of the era, but he brought me into these really unusual artists that were not mainstream. And that really opened my eyes. And I used to do the sound reinforcement for his band. So that's kind of what got me into the equipment side. But what really opened my ears was I bought a secondhand at very, very low price at Tech Hi-Fi's closeout shop in Cambridge, a complete quad electrostatic system with quad tube preamp and tube power amp, an AR turntable with a Shure V15 cartridge. It was, and we used to sit in the dark with the blacklight on and listen to music. And, quad electrostatic was so much more natural sounding than any other loudspeaker of that era. It was, you could just reach through the speaker and touch the musicians. And it was just, it just enhanced the musical enjoyment to a whole other level. And so that's part of why I'm sitting here today. That's what got me running down the road.
What a great story. I absolutely love it. Marshall, you're of that different gen.
A little bit.
There must be something that was a positive trigger point for you in terms of what you wanted to do.
Yeah, well, one of the more recent experiences that has moved me with regards to music and technology was my wife and I've been married 11 years, 12 this December, and she went to school in Massachusetts, despite being from the West Coast. I grew up in the Midwest. So she went to school on the West Coast, in Massachusetts near Boston, and the independent music scene is just so strong in Boston. The indie music scene is just great. And so she had collected these old CDs of these really kind of obscure artists over the years. And when we got married, she obviously still had the CDs. And so when I look at my Tidal account or my Qobuz account and I have all this music, she'll ask me from time to time, hey, can we play that CD that I've got, that Vance Gilbert CD or whatever the obscure artist is that she's thinking about. And even though it's in Tidal, it's so much easier for me to go into my vault, my local library, because I've obviously ripped it in FLAC, and just find it right there. I basically have all of her content, all of her CD content, even though it lives on the internet. I have it all right there in my vault, and I can just pick it up and say boom, and it transports her. And then by me seeing her kind of transported by listening to kind of her own music, if you want to call it that, her quotes own music, even though it's on the internet, they're her CDs, and I think that's just kind of special for me, and it's something that I enjoy. I enjoy listening to her music, her CDs, and then obviously my stuff too.
That's absolutely wonderful. Gentlemen, we are running out of time, but not before I take this opportunity to thank you both for taking time from your very busy day. I know even though it's Friday, we're all still working. Heaven knows I have plenty to do as soon as we sign off here, and I'm sure you do too. Final thoughts on NAD products in the future beyond the M33 that you want to share with us?
Greg?
Well, we're doing a lot of work with AVRs. We just introduced a new AVR as well. We've also just introduced some class-leading custom installation amplifiers and products. So those are a couple of things that are there. I think you're going to see the Just Add Speakers theme expand with more models that address that. There's a great story about Henry Close, the guy who founded KLH loudspeakers and Close Video Beam, and he was a real character, MIT grad, and he said he spoke a lot about in the third person. He said, "What one likes is threeness," and what one likes is threeness, and what he meant by that is a pair of speakers and a module that drives them. There's just something beautiful about that. It's the it's the Trinity. So that's our theme for this year. We're focusing in on threeness.
That's pretty cool.
Just Add Speakers.
When you think about the vision of that in his mind, with everything from the old Advent receivers and whatnot to where NAD is focused on in terms of the simplicity of the product, but also the high performance always has to be part of the formula. I think that's amazing to cap our conversation on. Gentlemen, as always, I'm very deeply grateful for your time. I hope you do well and you are safe where you are. Do keep in touch. You know how to reach me.
Likewise.
It's as easy as a phone
Likewise.
call and whatnot.
Happy Friday, yes.
Thank you. It's same to you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's it for now. And from Chicago, as always, if you have any questions on the products you've seen or heard about or talked about on our conversations from the listening room, it's a click away. Just visit us at musicdirect.com or give our team a call during normal business hours here in the U.S. at 1-800-449-8333. Even I might answer a phone call from time to time and say hello to you as well. For all of us at Music Direct, we do hope you've had a great week. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side of the screen.